Meantime, cracks in the foundation of the proposed unity government already forming. Under massive pressure from right-wing and Yamina voters, Yamina MK Amichai Chikli for the first to jump ship, vowing to vote against the coalition and leaving it with a narrow 61-seat majority. Then several other MKs are reportedly thinking of following suit, and the loss of just one more MK would doom the new government before it even begins. Many in the public likewise unconvinced at the Change-bloc's stability.
Yeah, I was against. I think it's not really a feasible government the way it's put together. But you know, I'm always hopeful and wish them luck.
There are two versions. One says that this will never last. It's too heterogeneous. It's too crazy. They will fight over any topic you can have in mind. The other version says that Israel needs a government so badly that they will have so much work to do. They need to pass a budget. They need to pass many resolutions that are waiting for a new government. And they will have the big enemy, Netanyahu, as head of the opposition, and this will be the glue that will keep them together if this government will even be formed.
So will the coalition receive a vote of confidence? And even if it does, what then? Joining me to discuss is political analyst Orly Rapaport and former Yesh Atid Knesset member Rabbi Dov Lipman. Rabbi and Orly, thank you so much for being with us today.
Good to be here.
All right, Rabbi, I'm going to start with you. How are you feeling last night at 11:30 p.m.?
First of all, I think there was a collective sigh throughout Israel because there was an actual possibility of a government. Put aside exactly the details and everything else, just the fact that maybe this is happening. I'll go a step further. I personally really like the fact that people from right wing to left wing came together and are trying to make this work. I'm not saying it's going to be successful, but I think for Israel overall, that's a very positive step. And the last part of that is the Ram Party. The fact that we could argue right-wing, left-wing all we want, but the fact that we're moving towards a point where an Arab party in Israel is willing to make a step towards being part of the Israeli government, I think that for us as a society, that's a very good sign. So whether or not this lasts, whether or not it even gets sworn in, which we'll talk about,
we're getting to that.
It still was a very positive development overall for Israel.
Orly, was that your take?
I'll tell you what, I want to first of all speak about the Arab party joining, which makes Dov very, very happy. Rabbi Dov very happy, and many people in Israel very happy. There's another side of Israel, the right wing, that is not very happy. And putting aside the fact that Netanyahu was willing to do the exact same thing, which he was, and maybe even offer them more for their support, I think that the hope for an Arab government was not for an Arab party, in the government, was not for this Arab party. We were hoping, people in Israel were hoping for a Zionist Arab party, and the Israeli Arabs who are Zionists do exist in Israel, and we believe that in pretty large amounts as well. The fact, though, that Mansour Abbas was willing to say, and Ram say, that we will put aside right now, let's say, the ideology, to put it so, to focus on the Arab society is something that makes us and me personally happy. I would have preferred an Arab Zionist party as well as everyone in the right wing, and then we wouldn't even have this problem. Yes, I was sitting from 10 p.m., I think. I did not understand, by the way, they were showing on different channels. There was like Eretz Nederet and another TV. Like, are you kidding me? We're sitting here biting our nails, waiting to see what will happen, and you're putting on some, like, amusement shows? But I did wait till midnight. I did hear the news about Nir Orbach from Yamina Party and the developments there. My personal view on that was that I hardly doubt that he will be the one to break Naftali Bennett's government, something that needs to be understood by many people at home, that they've been walking together for a very, very long time, many, many years since Naftali Bennett joined the Beit Yehudi party. I think it was 2013. Taking back from that point in time, to have Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked leave Beit Yehudi, Nir Orbach stayed with Beit Yehudi and kept in a way working with and being in very close contact with Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked. When Nir Orbach went head-to-head with Hagit Moshe in Jerusalem for heading the Beit Yehudi, Netanyahu supported Hagit Moshe from Jerusalem, and he left. He lost. He lost in that battle for heading Beit Yehudi. And still, Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked gave him a very realistic place. Number 5, I think it is in the Yamina party. So him being a member of the Knesset right now is owed to Naftali Bennett, that kind of, sorry to say, on TV, saved his ass and brought him back into the public life.
He's unlikely to defect.
So I'm saying that he is, even with all the sounds being heard and all the complaints being made against him and the pressure that he's been having, he does have a lot to thank Naftali Bennett for, which is why I doubt if he will make the move to stop from Naftali Bennett being prime minister.
So let's talk about the numbers again, though, and we'll come back to Ram and the Arab parties as well. But let's talk about the numbers. We have 61 seats. It's a very, very narrow majority. Just one Knesset member needs to defect, and then the whole thing is kaput. Rabbi, who do you see as maybe the weak link in the chain, in a sense?
So it's interesting. A 61-seat government, on the one hand, can be a disaster because you can have every one member of Knesset trying to pull away one another. On the other hand, it could be very positive in the sense that if you have the right coalition chairman who knows how to weave it and work it through, which is the number one question.
And
by the way,
the point.
Orbach was supposed to be in that position, but they want to find a way for this to last. They do. So people on the left wing, for example, Meretz, they finally have an opportunity to be in the ministries. Tamar Zandberg, I worked with her on environmental issues. Now she's the minister. She doesn't want to break that by saying something or pushing a left-wing agenda too far. Naftali Bennett...
She already threw in a bill to advance LGBTQ rights, which is great, but the point is that,
Any bills that have been thrown out in the 24th Knesset so far are not part of this government. Once this government moves forward, I do not think you're going to see...
That was part of her agreement with Lapid.
So that's part of what we're going to have to see. We're going to have to see when it's all said and done. Remember, for a government to be sworn in, we have to see the coalition agreements for everyone to see. That's the moment where I'll be able to look at you and say, do I think this can work or not? Because if anyone is pushing a left-wing agenda or a more right-wing agenda, it's not going to work. If they're able to find a way to put that aside and say, let's manage the economy, health, create unity, get a budget passed without anything extreme, it has a chance of lasting a certain amount of time. But again, it's going to be very, very tenuous as we see they can't even get to the 61 just for their very first vote.
So, Orly, go ahead.
Already I have comments. First of all, people seem to have forgotten that there are internal affairs in Israel as well, to what Dov just said. And I tend to agree. There are a lot of internal affairs that need to be taken care of. So putting aside a moment the annexation and other, the Arabs in Israel, many things that have that had the focus on them are not going to move aside. We have Joe Biden as president of the United States. Many things are not going to happen in any way. The other thing is that even there's a question about the government being formed because of the one hand that may fall. And then they're saying right now we've seen that the suggestion to have the meeting to replace Yariv Levin.
As Knesset Speaker.
So right now, exactly. So Neil Orbach's hand drew out, but then the joint Arab party joined their fingers, 6 fingers, for this vote.
From the outside, yeah.
From the outside, but they voted for having this meeting adjourned and for moving Yariv Levin from his position as the head of the Knesset.
Yeah.
So we are seeing some weird cooperation here, and if one hand does fall, we might see, and I understand that people are working on it behind the scenes, we might see 1 or 2 members of the Arab party, the joint Arab parties, vote for the government, which is something that Naftali Bennett is not necessarily interested in, but it may happen, and I'm not sure if at this point he can go back and say, "I will not."
I want to talk now a little bit more about the Arab parties, because as you mentioned before, there are Arab Zionists in Israel who are just fine living in a Jewish identity state, but their representation in the Knesset is minimal, it seems. And now you have the Islamic Ram party, which is coming in, a conservative party, and you have, arguably any other identity in the joint list, which is now from the opposite. So, meanwhile, we have, I'll give you another example with Yamina. Many Yamina voters who back Naftali Bennett to form a right-wing government are now said to be abandoning him, or rather, they feel betrayed by him. Do you think that a similar phenomenon is going to happen with Ram, where this might come back to bite him, or is he going to be seen now as the new pragmatic best choice for an efficient Arab representation?
he needs this government to be formed so he can bring achievements to the Arabs who voted for him. That's the bottom line. And based on his achievements, we're not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily the communist law that he's fighting for the
Arab,
illegal Arab constructions or whatever.
Which is not even Arab construction. It's just the illegal demolition of construction.
That is more popular with the Arab community.
It predominantly hurts them more, yeah.
Yes, it hurts them more, even though in the end we want everybody to obey to the law in Israel. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily what he should be going for, but the budgets that he's getting them, and if he can develop the community, the society, the Arab society, then he can come back with many more votes, because we know that the Joint Arab Party is not doing anything for the Arabs in Israel. They're only preoccupied with the Palestinians in Gaza and Ramallah.
And this is what we noticed in the polls. The reason why the joint list fell in the polls, because there is that population in Israel who just wants to have good lives for themselves, and they're sick of their politicians only talking about all the nationalistic issues. And this is going to be the test for Abbas, because if he does push at all on the more radical Islamic or nationalistic issues, there's no way Naftali Bennett, at a certain point, is going to break apart over that. If there's a security issue, let's say with Gaza, and Abbas pushes too far and doesn't allow the government, so to speak, to do what it has to do for Israel's security, it won't work. This is actually an opportunity for an Arab leader in Israel to actually represent the needs of the people.
He's doing that. He already, as part of his agreement, he secured several $1 billion, or I think it was 100 billion shekels over the next 30 years, something like that, for advancements in the Arab community.
Correct, and I think that's a very positive development, because there is infrastructure that there are needs that they have as a community, and now they actually have a government that's working towards it with a representative from the Arab community. Again, it'll be tested. This is part of the problem that I've had with the more right wing saying left wing, left wing, left wing. This is an interesting experiment.
He has a lot riding on his shoulders, I think, too, because this could easily go the other way. That if he, in a sense, so to speak, fails the Arab-Israeli community, it could be a long time before there's another Arab party in the government.
Yes, but you can see that there are voices within the Arab world, Arab Zionist world, that are starting to speak louder and louder. It started with the conflict in Gaza now, that they got more popularity. I think there is also a chance that in the future we will see a real Arab Zionist party.
All right, well, we have a lot more to discuss. I know we can talk about this forever.
Sure.
But we have about, I'd say, arguably a week before, maybe a little longer before the vote of no confidence. We'll see what happens until then. Orly Rapaport, Rabbi Dov Lipman, thank you so much.
Thank you.